Imagine you're driving down the road and the light turns red. Your first instinct would be to stop and obey the traffic law since you know that a red light means to stop. But what if chasing behind you was a murderer and you're trying to get away, or an erratic driver who by staying near endangers your life? In these scenarios, you have to make a decision. Follow the law put in place for the safety of you and other drivers, or go against man's law and follow the moral law. Both decisions could result in tragedy or success. These are decisions that need to be made every day, and why I was so intrigued by the contrasting characters of Creon and Antigone in Antigone by Jean Anouilh. This conflict between man's law and moral law is extremely evident in Creon and Antigone, yet the good character of the two is ambiguous. Both characters have flaws and are why I wanted to write my WorldLit paper on Antigone. The story begins with Antigone having already come back from burying her brother, yet why it is significant is unknown. Only until Creon explains of how she went against the law put in place do we see the contrast between Creon and Antigone's obedience to either man's law or moral law. Through the juxtaposition of Creon's obedience to man's law and Antigone's obedience to moral laws, Anouilh emphasizes that individuals who sacrifice one law for the other for the sake of control will fail because of the need of both to remain balanced. Antigone rationalizes her resistance against man's law by stating it was her duty to ensure that Polynices got the burial he deserves. Whether it was her role as a woman and the need to adhere to traditional burial practices, Antigone understands that this was a role that she had to do even if it went against man's law. But with her resistance, Antigone reveals her naivety when she herself doesn't know what it is she's resisting. She quotes, when asked why she's resisting, "For nobody, for myself." She doesn't know what she's fighting for, yet she believes what she's doing is right because it feels right and part of her moral law. From Antigone, we can see that the moral law is essential in resistance against a tyrannical ruler, but will ultimately fail because it lacks foundation. In contrast to Antigone, we have Creon, who brought back the order and control that Thebes desperately needed. Similar to Antigone, Creon knew of the role that he had to play, which was to keep Thebes as a functioning society with rules and regulations. So his obedience to man's law was what Thebes needed at the time. Yet when he allows that black and white viewpoint to blind him to anything else other than the law, he becomes a tyrannical ruler who is unable to see the moral law. As a result, he is unable to feel the emotion of the tragedy that occurred when his family died as a result of his choices. Creon has sacrificed his moral laws for the sake of control and for the sake of Thebes, and thus loses sight of anything else except for the law. This law versus morals conflict is not just seen in books, but in various societies around the world. One of the most prominent and well-publicized is the Philippines' war on drugs. Under the law that Filipino President Rodrigo Duterte has put in place, there has been over 7,000 deaths of both drug users and innocent passerbys. His actions have been widely criticized, yet this tragedy still occurs because of the power that man's law has in a society over the moral law. Although control is useful in a society, becoming tyrannical is what calls for the intervention of moral law, as seen in the Philippines. Here we can see the negative repercussions that sole obedience to man's law brings. From this real-world example and the multiple arguments in Antigone, the importance of society that is both obedient to man's law and knows of the moral law is revealed. Without both, a society will fail to function.